Finding housing from abroad as you're going through the immigration process can be extremely challenging, but it is something that is required for the D8 digital nomad visa as well as the D7 visa. If you've never heard of Idealista, it is the #1 app that people use in Portugal to find residences both to rent and purchase. I'm going to share our experiences as well as other people's experience with applying for the D8, D7 visa and trying to secure housing. When we first applied to the D8 visa, we were told that we just needed 6 months of accommodation and it can be anywhere in Portugal. So we first applied with different Airbnbs throughout the country because our idea was to actually explore all of Portugal, live in the north, central, and south. When we submitted our application, we actually heard back from the immigration offices and they said, sorry, you actually need accommodation for 6 months in one place. So we actually already were in Portugal on our tourist visa. Luckily, we were in person, and then we started to immediately need to find a lease that was at least 6 months long with the same address. So after the immigration office reached out to us and said that we needed to find alternative accommodations, we actually went on Airbnb and booked a property for 6 months in the Algarve region. I actually recommend doing this if you can, because what happened was we booked a place that was fully refundable, not knowing if our visa would be approved. So we submitted that accommodation and it was accepted by the immigration office. Interestingly enough, the person sold that property after our visa was approved for the D8, but before we had our IMA appointment in Portugal. So we had to scramble and find new accommodations before we actually had our IMA appointment in Portugal, even though our temporary visa was already approved with that residence address. The reason you have to have at least 6 months in one location is because of how long it takes you to get your residence card delivered to your place. So when we arrived in Portugal, we finally found a lease through Idealista. We went in person to see that property, which is also why we originally booked Airbnb, because we were doing sight unseen. And then we ended up, once we were there, had to find another accommodation because someone canceled our Airbnb listing. Then we looked on Idealista every single day and went to go see a property. They had an open house, went there, loved it, talked to the owners, loved them, and that's the place we live in now. We ended up signing a 2-year lease with them instead of just a 6 months because we love the property and the city of Lagos so much. With Idealista, it's a lot easier to be there in person in Portugal to select your property. That being said, we have friends that are on the D7 visa. Almost all of them rented their properties sight unseen and actually really love where they live. Most of those people, though, are doing the D7 visa, which requires a 12-month lease. So with the D8, you have a little bit more flexibility, which makes places like Airbnb a good option for just a 6-month lease. It's really hard to find a 6-month lease on Idealista, and it's even harder because many of those are kind of not geared towards long-term living.